because when my father eventually passes away, I'll have to go down to the United States or hire somebody to represent me to claim that property by kinship down in the United States. My dad currently lives in Tennessee. He owns about 16 acres. And his health isn't doing so good, but he's getting to be around the age of 60. And I am his next of kin. But I reside in Canada, and but he abandoned me quite a while ago, but we still talk every day. But I am his next of kin, and we talk every day and whatnot, but he's sort of unable to you know how it is when they're still around 60 or whatever. But I know he's going to lighten up when he gets to about 70, 80, 90. And I know that the law is, it says that it's the closest living blood relative. Okay? And that is me being his son. I am his closest living blood relative. The specifics of determining next of kin and inheritance vary by jurisdiction. So I'll have to take a look at it, I'll have to get a lawyer to take a look at it. A legally and properly executed will covering inheritable property usually takes precedence over next of kin inheritance rights. Funds from insurance policies and retirement accounts go to beneficiaries designated by these documents, regardless of this. So I'll have to talk to him about that when he gets much older, or just I'll have to ease it in with him. But I don't believe he has a proper will. And I am his child, so I'm fairly sure I would be able to obtain it by being his blood relative child. I'm his only blood child, and for example, the next of kin might need to make medical decisions if the person becomes incapacitated or takes responsibility for their funeral arrangements and financial affairs after the relative dies. So if my dad ever became incapacitated, technically by law, I have that right over him, even over his wife, being his closest blood relative, being his son. I'm his one and only son. Next of kin is sometimes interpreted in a broader sense to include the spouse, but I believe the spouse is incapacitated as well, with prejudice and things like that. And I believe she is intimidating my father. And I believe the spouse family is also intimidating my father with threats of violence, as well as actually hitting him and things, and poisoning him and things like that. So that would void her spousal kinship. All right, and I could do that through possible autopsy. When he passes away, I'll have the mortician take a look at him and check if he's ever been poisoned before, as well as if he's ever been beaten, and that will prove that she's voided that. But I believe he's added me to his will a little bit, but I'll have to keep talking to him. But I believe I'll have to go with that in the future, or at least quite possibly we'll have to see what his wife says if he does pass away before his wife, who is significantly younger than him. Him being around 60, her being, I think, must have just turned 40 or as close to there. So she's much younger than him, and he's had some health problems. Now, that's what scares me, is that she was a homeless girl before, sort of, and after she loses him, I could see her just using the money for drugs and sex, and how would I even get in contact with her? It's my father that runs the phone and all that. Okay, so there's a chance that she might try to run off with the all the property and the assets and things, and when I try to call down to her, there just won't be any answer. And that's where the lawyers will come into effect, and things like that, to go claim it by the kinship, especially if she does um, because that would be sort of unjust to not split up anything to the next of kin, being me, the blood relative son, to not split up any sort of inheritance for the son to get, not even an acre or half, like say 8 acres. I would say that would be fair to, if she was alive and my father had passed away, that she were to talk to me and appropriate at least 8 acres or half of the assets to me. If she can't do that, that would show some sort of malicious intent, and that would be a violation, I believe, of the law. Let's see. What's this word here? Intestate refers to dying without a legal will. When a person dies, which quite possibly could be my father, I don't think he really has a legal will. And it really depends on how powerful that attorney is as well. If that attorney that he has is not a very powerful attorney, and he has a will with an attorney, and that attorney passes away, or say that attorney had an atrocity where that legal will and that attorney were to catch on fire or anything, then that would make that will invalid. So this would be the intestate law or whatever. It says when a person dies in intestacy, determining the distribution of the deceased assets then becomes the responsibility of a probate court. So then I would have to prove to the court that I am that blood relative next of kin to my father, which I have. I have birth certificates with my father's signature. I have photos with my father, and I also have recorded phone conversations with my father, as well as public school records and other things like that. When an individual dies, his or her assets are divided among the beneficiaries listed in his or her will. In some cases, the testator or deceased does not leave a will that should contain instructions on how his or her assets should be distributed after death. When a person dies without a will, he is said to have died intestate or intestate. To have died in intestacy means a court-appointed administrator will compile any assets of the deceased, pay any liabilities, and distribute the remaining assets to those parties deemed as beneficiaries. So that would be my duty, to compile evidence from now until my father dies. So he's still got, the average life expectancy, I believe, is 83 years old. So we got still about 20, 25, 30 years. But now's the time for me to start compiling my evidence to be deemed at least as some sort of beneficiary to my father, which I am the only one next to his spouse, Nicole, that would be deemed as a beneficiary. And like I said, now if Nicole is very malicious in not believing that I am his next of kin or whatever, then I believe that would be sort of, wouldn't that void sort of her beneficiaries, or sort of raise some questions to the courts on why she's being so vicious with my inheritance. That, as people know, you're supposed to receive an inheritance from your parents, especially if they're wealthy enough to do such. Okay, that would be unjust, unhumanitarian, and that would just be plain old vicious, malicious, and what's another word? I'm trying to think of another word, but you get what I'm saying. That would be just plain, it would just be plain, to me, illegal to do that to your own son, and not have him left anything to survive in this big world that is Earth. All right. If I have to, like I have, inherit his debt, then why would I not have the right to inherit his assets if I've inherited his debt, which I have and had to deal with? One of the administrator's duties is to locate the legal heirs of the deceased, which would include surviving spouses, children, and parents. Both of my father's parents, which are my grandparents, are deceased. He has one remaining current wife, my mother being his ex-wife, but I am his only blood child, complete blood child. The order in which heirs inherit from a descendant's estate when there is no estate plan is called, once again, intestate succession. The probate court will assess what assets need to be distributed among the legal heirs and how to distribute them if that's the case, which I think that is how it would go. All right, it would probably go to the courts, and it would I'm fairly easy to find. My father's name is John Slote. My name is Thomas Perron-Slote. And I'm listed as his child on White Pages and all the other ones, and Google. But I'm in Canada, which is still North America, and it's not very far. I'm only a couple hundred miles away from my father. What, 300, 400 miles at most? 500 at most? I think only 300 miles, honestly. All right. My father's a dual citizen. He's actually naturally born in Canada, but he bought property down in the United States and lives and resides down there. Close friends of the deceased are not usually part of the list of beneficiaries unless he's got some legal will where he's giving his friends some things. Especially not when it comes to those intestate estates or intestate estates. All right, that is supposed to go, it's supposed to be for the person that you brought into this world or the person that you left behind. Okay? However, if the deceased had a joint account with the right of survivorship or owned property jointly with another, the joint asset will automatically belong to the surviving party, which I don't think he does. He might have a joint account with Nikki, but it's not mostly the joint accounts or anything like that if they do. But I don't think they do. I think it's a separate account. But it's mostly like the appropriation of, say, some acreage or, and quite possibly money. But I don't think he has much money. I think he has more assets like property and vehicles and things. Now, it's mostly just some of the the acreage and things like that, where I could inherit that and then sell it, quite possibly, or even there's probably a possibility that the court could analyze how much that property is worth, and I could forfeit that property to the state, and then the state could wire me up to my bank an amount of money that would be appropriate to whatever amount of property that belonged to me, if I didn't want to go down and claim it. If I wanted to just have it sold back to the state or whatever, and then they give me some sort of money for that property. That would be a big consideration that I think would be fitting for this specific family, being my father and me and Nikki. All right, so that's my little blurb on my inheritance by kinship down in the United States, where I've lived for a short time. I was down in Florida with my father for 5 years, and then we went up to Tennessee, where he still lives, and he's went back and forth and yada yada, but he's back in Tennessee, and I was there for about a year and a half before I came back to Canada. I decided I wanted to come back to Canada, and there was some sort of stipulations between that where I was actually supposed to go back to my father's, but some other stipulations happened where now I reside in my natural in where I'm naturally born. Now my father's also naturally born here in Canada, like I said. So I always want my father to come back to Canada so that it's not so sticky of a thing to deal with whenever I need to claim my inheritance and things. Okay, because I know I'm going to be able to win it, but it's going to be so much more sticky if I'm up here and he's all the way down there and he passes, all right, comparative to if I'm right next to him up here and he passes. And if, say, he sold his property down there and moved back up north, when he eventually passes, I could be right beside him, and it's basically just left right on top of my lap or whatever. All right, being a completely separate case to where that's how it was with him. When his father passed away and his mother passed away, he received an inheritance. So that's how it worked when his parents died. So that's how it should work when he dies. For me, if that's, it's kind of unfair. His parents left him a very expensive property, one that just sold for $1.3 million over off the 8th line in Hillsborough. What is it called? That sold for $1.3 million, and when he bought it, wasn't on this exact road here, but a similar road, what is it called? He was left vehicles, and he had a great big auction, and that's where he got his money to go down to the United States and buy property and all the other things that he's had down there. Was the inheritance, mostly the inheritance he got. And then that also, while I'm on the subject, I also have an uncle, great uncle, that's in Hillsborough, still alive, that I believe that I would be entitled to an inheritance with, some sort of inheritance. Now I know he's got some daughters and he's got this and that, but he's got great wealth, being that of what I've heard is 100 acres. And I went and visited him a while back, and he's the original owner of all that property, even the one that my father inherited. And I believe, being his blood great nephew, I should be entitled to at least at least a quarter acre, a half acre, even 1 acre, even anything, okay? Just anything to leave me to fend out here in this world. And that's my Uncle Roy Lang. And I know that's going to be a big thing too. Huge thing. Him and Aunt Stella, who are getting pretty old, all right? And I'm not going to be able to search him up by searching Uncle Roy Lang. All right, but that is my great uncle. And here's his phone number here. I could give him a call one day. All right. But that's basically where I'm at with that right now. And I've been just trying to compile all the evidence I can. People say, well, why are you putting it on YouTube publicly? Well, it's already public information pretty much anyway. But my goal is to sort of make it public knowledge for people that are trying to manipulate people's minds and things and make it not public knowledge to try to cover it up, to try to do a fraud. That's one reason. Another reason is, okay, I already back it up and keep it on my local hard drives and things. All right. But say I have before was a victim of crime where somebody destroyed my hard drives or stole them. That gives me another resource, being that of California, to where I can host and keep this video secure, being a legal video for the future, so that I don't have to waste the breath of my lungs. I can just press play again, play the video where I have my argument, and then I can go from there instead of just having to do it over and over again. That's the best way to do it in 2021 and beyond. It's probably one of the best at doing it right now. But if I'm not, let me know what I have to do. If you have any suggestions to help me secure my inheritance for when I'm older. I'm 27 now. And when my father dies, if he doesn't die in a freak accident, you know, I have freak accidents in my family. My grandfather died in a freak accident. My uncle died in a freak accident. And there was a lot of accidents out in Hillsborough and elsewhere, whatever, but that I've heard about. But so if he doesn't die that way, which you could die any second, all right? He's had heart problems and all that. So who knows how old I'll be, or who knows if I'll die. But potentially, if there's a chance that I'm still alive and breathing, and my father or my uncle and all that passes away, I want to be able to make sure that it's getting in the right hands. I believe I'm capable of receiving something and doing something with it. You know what I mean? I believe I'm entitled to something, and it's going to be positively used, and it's going to positively affect my life and others. And I believe that if it gets totally in the other hands of some people, it might, or if it gets frauded or something, that potentially it would not be good. All right, and that's all. Anyways.